The SEA exams have been postponed till July, and I know that may be a breath of relief to some. It may be just extending the anxiety to others, and to others it may be just more of the same because they weren't prepared now and they wouldn't be prepared then, and they may not ever be prepared. When we're looking at exams during the pandemic, it's just an extension of the same thing that happened to exams before the pandemic. Exams by their very nature have some biases. And if you are better prepared, if you have a better surrounding, if you have better exam prep going on for you, generally you do better at exams. Exams are meant really to test your intelligence, to test how much you know, to test how much you have learned in a specific period in a school. But as with nearly any other organization that continues going for a long period of time, the corruption in it, and sometimes it's not purposeful corruption, but for example in CXC, the fact that nearly every question is now re-asked because this examination board has been around for a while and they have a question pool, so the questions get re-asked and rehashed. So people who have access to these question pools now have an unfair advantage, and that does tell on the exam, and it makes it that the exam no longer tests exactly just intelligence. The secondary entrance assessment exam has been postponed from June 10th to July 1st, 2021. The Education Minister said that the anticipated delay had become necessary due to the trajectory of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing challenges posed by the health regulation at this time. Before that announcement, since April the 23rd, the Ministry of Education wrote to the Caribbean Examination Council, that's CXC, and they wrote to alert them as to a possible date shift following Trinidad and Tobago's uptick in daily COVID-19 positive cases. What you have to keep in mind is that CXC is also in charge of the SEA and carrying out the SEA exam also. So when the date had to change, the date has to change, so they had to consult with CXC first in order to get this change done. Hey, click that like button right down there, and if you finish the entire video and you enjoy what you saw and you have a comment, make that comment. If you don't, still make a comment because it increases the engagement on the video and would allow it to have a further reach and reach to a further audience. Don't forget to subscribe to if you aren't already subscribed. I'm getting around to about one video a day, and I'm talking about topics that I find interesting to me and pertinent to me as a young person living in the Caribbean region. What do I find pertinent? Well, I guess some of what I find pertinent you may find pertinent too. That's why you're here. If you have another topic that you'd like to hear about, drop it in the comments, tell me about it, and I may do a video on it. Following a stakeholder meeting on April 22nd, during which safety concerns of face-to-face interactions were raised, given the number of new infections being recorded daily, which stood then at 81, Gatsby Dolly said a decision was taken to leave the exam as scheduled for June 10th, in deference to the students who had been working diligently to prepare despite the challenges of the past 14 months. So previously they were going to just leave the exam as is, but now they have decided to push it back. The reason they were going to leave it as is was because their statement, and it was that the students that were in preparation, and that's just the truth, that's just the fact of it. Any one of us who went through and remember going through the SEA period, especially if you had more serious and more stern parents, the run up to this exam, in particular the fact that some of these children would have been home with some of their parents, the run up to this exam may have been very stressful to some children, and some children just want to get it over with. And by making sure the exam is carried out, by doing that, they're saying you'd be easing up some of the stress and tension on these children. And they wrote to CXC to request that CXC do some of the same. Our government wrote to CXC and other regional stakeholders, and they spoke about their preference of a pushing back, of a postponement of the CXC exams also. And this is where a lot of the discussion is going. What do we do at CXC? What exactly do we do at CXC? And it seems to me the most clear answer that nearly everyone has is that we certainly need to do something. And leaving it just as is and just as the exam always was is the one thing we know that we shouldn't do. And I find that to be a very fair assessment. If what we're seeing the world over, and when we look all around in the world, it seems to be the common trend that we're seeing. This new term, the new normal. And what the new normal is supposed to represent is a new set of norms, a new set a new thought pattern, new systems that we need to bring in place in order to make it through this COVID pandemic. And even after this COVID pandemic, the new patterns that we would have to pick up may have to be carried on still. And if we're saying this, that it's a brand new world we're living in and we have to have some new normals and get new habits, then maybe, just maybe, this exam that has been run the same way for decades now may need to have a new look at it. And it just might be the perfect opportunity to do that. Because for years, many educators have been saying that the CXC exam doesn't ideally suit for the purposes that we want it to suit in the Caribbean. The problem though with changing CXC and finding new ways to teach our children and new ways to revolutionize our educational system, the problem is, what exactly do we do? What are the options? And it's very easy to heap on the criticisms on CXC. It's clear to see it's glaring, especially being people that went through the system. We were able to very easily see where a lot of problems are in the system. But having a solution and getting a clear solution to this problem is not as easy as some may make it seem. And whatever the solutions are that we get for the future, how does that actually help the students that have to do the exam now? In one of the contemplations I did on CXC, I saw one person comment and they were like, well, I did CXC last year during the pandemic, you all would be fine. And I think they meant it as encouragement to the students. But there is a difference between doing the exam last year and doing the exam this year. Last year, what you did was just the exam, just the CXC exams during the pandemic. You basically, your entire school year was normal. But this year, the entire school year was thrown off. The entire school year had a whole new approach to teaching. And it's very strange to have this new approach to teaching that everyone is willingly admitting would have created severely unequal playing fields for students. And it's weird to have this system that we know is so problematic and then lead the students straight into the regular exam as it was before. Like, I think about it as CXC being a bus, CXC being a vehicle, CXC being a tractor. And we tied all these Caribbean students onto the CXC tractor that is pulling them. And this pulling is supposed to strengthen them, supposed to give them new knowledge as they go on. They're being pulled at a certain pace. But then this pandemic comes, and we know that what the pandemic is doing is changing the field that some people are running on. Some people are running on a smooth road, while the pandemic has made it that some people are running on some very uneven ground. So we are very much aware that they cannot keep up with the pace that CXC wants to push and wants to carry on. But if the vehicle that CXC is, if the tractor that CXC is, continues at the same pace, and we're saying, well, CXC is just doing as CXC does, but we know that the pandemic changed the reality for a lot of students, then by just allowing CXC to continue pulling every student at the same pace, we are creating a system that is leaning into inequality. And I find it ridiculous to then say that this is just the system as it is and that the students have to just fight through the system. Because this isn't nature. I said it in my contemplation, CXC isn't just the hurricane season that we are to expect to come as a seasonal terror. This is a system that we created, and the intention we say that we created it for in the Caribbean was that we want the Caribbean to have its own examination board, that we have a more suited educational system for our people. And if we're saying that that's what we want for the system, and our own education system seems like it's purposefully going to disadvantage a large number of students, then what benefit is it really? If we want to look to see what are the options that can be done to the exams, let's look at our Commonwealth neighbors. Maybe the US may not be an ideal example because their educational system is a good bit different from ours, but we can look to the UK, the United Kingdom, and see how they are treating their students and how they are treating their exams, and we can look to India and see. Firstly, in the UK, they stopped their exams. Summer exams have been cancelled in 2020 and 2021 due to disruption caused by the coronavirus pandemic. As a result, schools will calculate grades to be awarded to their pupils in 2021. But there will not be a return to the kind of statistical process run by the CCEA, which proved controversial in 2020. Okay, so some backstory on this. During 2020 in the United Kingdom, when they cancelled the exams then, what they did was they ran an algorithm to work out what grades the student would get. And what that caused was a lot of A-level students particularly got a severe reduction in their grades. And it caused an intense uproar over there. The strange thing is, a very similar thing happened here, and the uproar that was caused just kind of flitted out, and now no one cares about it, and there are some people that I understand still haven't received their CXC certificates since last year, and now we are currently fighting down whether we are going to have this exam in the first place and when are we going to have this exam. So what they did over in the UK is that the coursework part of their exams, they dropped the entire thing. So okay, you're still going to do it, but it will not count towards your A-level grade in the next year. So you still have it, but the grade doesn't count. Not exactly what we did with our SBAs, as the SBA grade still counts, but they decreased the value at which it counts at. So now the SBA grade doesn't count for the same amount. I've heard many students complain about this in itself because they decreased this after the students already did the SBA. That isn't help, that is cruelty. I already spent my effort there and did the SBA, and then you come now to decrease it. So I already put in the work for 100% SBA that you now say is worth 50%. That's not exactly help. So what are they doing in the United Kingdom as an alternative? How are they getting grades out for these students? Because the education system still needs to carry on and the students may still need to advance from one year to the other. So how are they going to do that? Well, what they are planning to do is to take teachers' assessments of it. So the teachers do the assessments and the teachers give a grade that they expect the student to get, and that be the grade that is used in giving them their final grade, as it were. One of the problems with that is that it gives a lot of work to the teachers. The teachers now have a lot of extra work. The head of one South Wales secondary said staff and students were under immense pressure. There's around 30,000 grades that we as a school need to award to students, said Hugo Hutchinson, head of the 1,700 pupil Monmouth Comprehensive School. For each of these 30,000 grades, we need to write an individual subject record. It is an enormous amount of work. And for each of those grades, there are also a number of assessments, a number of papers that count towards it. And that may just be one of the key solutions, because who better than the teachers to give this assessment? And some may find that, okay, the teachers may give an unfair assessment. What if the teacher has preference to the student or has a dislike for the student? And maybe that might have some truth to it. But I think also the parents aren't invisible in this equation. And parents are aware of where their children are at. And teachers would be risking a lot if they attempt to use that method to attempt to cheat, because a lot of attention would be on them. And then even if you're thinking this is unfair, then it's unfair as compared to what? Is it unfair as compared to the current CXC system, the current exam systems that we are going already into? Because I think if we're doing a comparative study, it may be less unfair to allow teachers who are more aware of who these students are, who are more aware of where the capabilities of these students are, allow them to choose to give a grade and allow them to do the assessment, and they can do a continuous assessment. And their grade may be fairer, to me, I think, would be fairer than the CXC grade at the end of this pandemic year and then an exam during this spike season. In India, their exams are separated into several boards. Different boards control different exams, and the majority of the largest boards have cancelled their exams already because they're seeing a similar problem with the pandemic and the run-up to the pandemic. And for a lot of those boards, they're attempting to do very similar to what is being done in the United Kingdom and allow teachers to have internal assessments and continual assessments, and that these may fill in the gaps. In the Caribbean, I'm not sure if that's possible, because some of these things to allow them to really function would have had to have been put in place since the beginning of the academic year. And trying to put them in place now 3 weeks before the proposed exams would just be very difficult. But lest we forget what is at stake here, an article in the Indian Express pointed out a lot of the changes that they are seeing happen during their pandemic. Changes to children and changes to children's lives. And a lot of the progress that was being made is now being reversed due to some of the conditions created by this pandemic. The COVID pandemic and our forgotten children. I recently interviewed a woman who had a 13-year-old daughter. Who looks after your child when you go to work, I asked. I have married her off, was the answer. Why? I can't leave a girl alone at home. I can't stay with her either. I have to work. We need the money, she said. I saw a woman loading rubbish in a truck along with her 10-year-old son. Why is he working? I asked. He runs wild at home. The school is closed and I have no place to leave him, she replied. These incidents happened in Chennai thousands of girls have been married off in South India in 2020. I don't think we stand the risk of thousands of girls being married off, but I do think that we stand the risk that those who are already in disadvantaged and impoverished situations, that things can get worse for them. And especially when thinking about children, when dealing with children and those that we consider in society innocents, it would be wise of us to keep in mind the level of comfort that these children are living in. And not comfort just in the luxury sense, comfort as in we have systems already set up in place in our world, in our countries and in our regions that only really work when the entire region, when everyone is at a certain level. And the new style of education that we have with everyone online and everyone requiring some kind of device, there's a base level of access needed for that. And are we sure that everyone is reaching this base level of access? And then on top of that, when we build an entire education system and we're seeking to continue with an entire education system that wasn't built for this style of learning and this style of teaching, are we then creating severely unfair scenarios that are only going to keep us back in the end and are only going to work against the Caribbean region in the long term? Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.
When you wake up in the morning and you hear the birds cry.